Hey guys, this is Meditation Amsterdam. My name is Pablo, and in this last video of 2023, I wanted to talk about perhaps one of the most important concepts, or rather, one of the most important methods that we can implement in our spiritual journey, and that is the method of grounding. During this year, I've come across several people who have reached out because either their spiritual practice had reached a kind of plateau, or their spiritual practice had taken them into places that were uncomfortable in not so much of a transformative, but in an unwholesome type of level. Their energetics had been flaring up. They felt unstable, no longer in control of what was happening. And perhaps exhibiting symptoms of a kind of energetic dysregulation that had set in. I have also come across a fair number of videos on the internet that are there to describe these terrible kundalini experiences that people are going through. And some of them sound a little bit almost like one of those X-Men movies in which a teenager discovers that it has powers and it takes over them, and they're completely dysregulated. So something going wrong in the process. And I wanted to close the year by offering a little bit of guidance around the topic of grounding as an all-important practice and modality that is very necessary regardless of where you are in your spiritual journey or in your trauma resolution journey, which is equally applicable. So I'm not entirely sure historically where grounding comes from, but I know that the school of Southern Taoism was very much built around tantric practices to do with embodiment and what's called sinking the chi, or bringing your energy down. Whereas things such as hatha yoga and kundalini yoga was meant to bring your energy up. I was a hatha yoga practitioner for quite some time, and I can attest to the fact that the pranayama and asana practices from hatha yoga made me fairly dysregulated and electric in my nature. And it didn't feel like it was all that wholesome for me, perhaps due to the way I'm wired. And I've seen that happen now to several people. Unfortunately, our knowledge of the energetic aspects of yoga is still fairly poor. So we are very often engaging in practices and we don't clearly understand what the energetic consequences of those practices will be. And that can land us in a place where we are very dysregulated. I had a similar experience, for example, when I went to a 10-day Vipassana retreat, after which my energetics were flaring up very badly and I was depersonalized. So I was almost forced to learn what this whole embodiment topic was about. And in order to illustrate a little bit more about what the solution was to those kind of practices, I wanted to read to you guys a very short passage from a writing called Yasenkana. I want to get this right, so let me look up the book. So this is from a Zen master called Hakuin Eikaku, and the Yasenkana was a writing that he shared in which his meditation efforts landed him in a very weird energetic space that he couldn't resolve. And he finds it's a true story, he finds a hermit living in the outskirts of Kyoto, in which, and the hermit is called Hakuyu, and he teaches him what is called Naikan practice. Naikan in Japanese might be the equivalent of Neigong, which is essentially an internal alchemical practice very much focused on sinking the chi, or bringing the energy down into the lower parts, especially the lower belly and the legs. It is explained that in our energetics, fire tends to rise, so the hard fire tends to go to your head, and the water tends to go down by its weight. And when that happens, we become very dysregulated. So the way Hakuin describes his malaise is, he says, the fire rose to my heart, where it burned so fiercely that it rose to my head, drying my lungs until they burnt. While my legs felt as cold as ice, my ears buzzed constantly with the sound of rushing water, and I became weak and fearful. I felt totally exhausted, physically and mentally, my strength drained. Night and day I was tormented by hallucinations. I was in a continuous sweat and constant tears filled my eyes. And then when he describes his problem to Hakuyu, the hermit, he says, you have a serious illness. By pushing yourself too hard, you forgot the cardinal rule of religious training. You are suffering from meditation sickness, which is extremely difficult to cure by medical means. By contemplating on truth too strenuously, you have lost the balance between body and spirit, and therefore you got sick. Something very hard to cure, this Zen illness of yours, which is also referred to as Zenbio, by the way. And he goes on to describe that there's an energetic flow in the body that needs to be kept very much in check and going in the right direction. And that when we engage in spiritual practices, this flow can become dysregulated. So whether you're doing trauma resolution, basic embodiment, or engaging in advanced spiritual practices, the practice of grounding your energy is going to be your bread and butter, as a matter of fact. Right? So you don't want to engage in upward practices such as contemplation on pure source, or even basic trauma resolution or things of that kind, or a lot of meditation, if you're not at the same time grounding quite a lot, as a matter of fact. You can consider your system as a kind of wet bioelectrical magnetic system. And if we ignore this, then we can get ourselves into trouble. In my experience, the best grounding technique out there by far is the practice of standing Qigong with your arms around your lower belly. Standing Qigong is the bread and butter of Qigong and Tai Chi basic training as well. And the idea, as they describe it, is to sync the Qi, to sync your energy. And there's very specific instructions to be followed for that practice to be effective. The effectiveness of that practice is orders of magnitude higher and more wholesome and more cultivating than basic grounding advice that you get on the internet when your kundalini is flaring up or when your energetics are flaring up, such as taking a walk or doing exercise or eating heavy meals and things of that kind. All those have their place, for sure. Yeah, they definitely have a grounding effect. But when your energetics are going upwards in a strong way, they're not going to be enough. It won't be enough to bring your chi back down, which is what needs to happen. We need to become magnetic in the top and electric in the bottom for things to be wholesome and correct. The more advanced your practice is, the more grounding you will need. Once again, if you see your system as a system of bioelectricity, then grounding becomes much more logical, much more important. And you don't want to be submitting your psychosomatics to higher levels of energy that tend to rise by nature, and just leave it at that, because that's how people become depersonalized. That's how people become schizophrenic, or start having visions that are uncomfortable, simply have their head spinning around in circles, or blushing, teary-eyed. All these kind of symptoms are classic either kundalini or heart fire rising type of symptoms. I don't want to mix those two. I'm perfectly aware that kundalini rising is different than your chi rising. It's not the same thing, but that is the case. Maybe your grounding practices are the one thing. It's going to be your bread and butter to make sure that you can sustain higher levels of energy. When it comes to trauma resolution and basic, just basic meditative and integration practice, grounding is what does, as a matter of fact, the integration for you, is what allows the integration to feel like things are once again settling into a new higher energetic reality, or is what allows you to be in touch with more distressing type of symptoms and more open channels without losing it, but because you feel your substance, your groundedness, and it's something that carries you. And it's like a solid container that holds that energy in place without you having to do something mentally, because your conscious mind and your thinking mind and your egoic tools are not going to be enough to contain the kind of energies that you can unlock when you do spiritual practices. So as a matter of fact, I was trying to figure out if I could, give a message for 2024. I don't think, I have anything very relevant to say in terms of resolutions or advice of that kind. But if you were to consider something new or something that can really help you in pretty much everything you're doing, you know that I talk a lot about psychosomatics, a lot about embodiment. Grounding is the bread and butter. It should be the large majority of what you do should be grounding practice on a very refined level. And when combined with additional practices that are more upward in nature and more related to pure awareness, that's going to be a great combination to use for self-cultivation and self-development. So I also wanted to give a word out to everyone who's been supporting the channel this year. For the last 4 years, the channel has something like 50 followers, which was pretty much nothing. And then this year we're closing with 1,300. And your comments in the comment section are always incredibly supportive and very interesting to hear. Many of you have reached out for consultations and ongoing coaching, and it's going very, very well with all of you guys. So thanks for that. I wish you the very best in 2024. Thanks again for all the support. Very motivating for me to continue doing this. And as usual, if you think that the content is valuable to others, then all your commenting, liking, sharing, and subscribing makes this content much more available. And with that, I wish you a very happy new year, and I'll be back with more as usual. Cheerio and bye-bye.